If you're reading this, I need you to understand I am not insane. I know how all of this will sound, but I have to get it out because I don't think I have much time left. This began last October, when my older sister Marissa called to tell me she had closed on an old farmhouse near a stretch called Fox Hollow Road. She really wanted to renovate it into a bed and breakfast. She was always more impulsive than me, but I admired her courage. She asked if I could take a week off work to help her start cleaning the place up. I remember the drive up vividly. The trees were flaming red and yellow with autumn. The road twisted higher into the mountains, my cell service dying in patches. The farmhouse lay about 15 miles outside Phoenicia, perched on a steep hillside overlooking an overgrown orchard. It was a long, 2-story structure with a collapsed barn out back and a porch that sagged like a frown. Marissa was waiting on the steps, grinning, bundled in a red flannel jacket. "You made it," she announced while waving at me. I tried to smile, but as soon as I stepped out of the car, I felt it, a sort of strange weight pressing down on me. The sky seemed a shade darker over that house, and the air felt colder than it should. She brushed off my hesitation, as she always did. "Don't get spooked, it just needs some love," she said, as she led me inside. The house smelled like rotting plaster and damp wood. Wallpapers were hung in tatters, and every floorboard creaked. As Marissa gave me the tour, I kept catching glimpses of something from the corner of my eye, a shape at the end of the hall or in the doorway behind us. When I'd turn, there'd be nothing. I told myself it was the nerves, because I didn't want to look like a coward. That first night, we unrolled sleeping bags in what used to be the living room. No heat or electricity yet, just lanterns. We drank cheap wine from paper cups and made jokes about ghosts to cover our unease. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound, almost as if someone was walking slowly upstairs. I thought maybe Marissa had gotten up to use the bathroom, but when I turned, she was fast asleep next to me, breathing evenly. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor above us. Then they stopped directly overhead. I lay there, too scared to move. Eventually, the footsteps resumed, retreating back down the hall. I waited an hour before I dared to close my eyes. The next morning, I tried to tell Marissa about the footsteps. She waved it off, saying old houses make noise, but her face was paler than before. That's when I knew that she'd heard it too. We started work that day, pulling down wallpaper, scrubbing the kitchen and sweeping out piles of dead leaves. I tried to focus on the physical labour, but every so often I'd look up and see Marissa staring at the ceiling, as if she was listening to something. When I asked what she heard, she'd shake her head a bit too quickly. That afternoon, I stepped out back to explore the collapsed barn. It had once been painted red, but now the boards were sun-bleached and falling apart. When I tried the door, it swung open with a groan. Inside, shafts of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating old tools and broken crates. Something moved in the far corner, which made me nearly bolt. But as my eyes adjusted, I realised it was just a sheet draped over a mound, probably some old furniture. Feeling foolish, I stepped closer and pulled the sheet aside. Beneath it was an antique rocking horse, child-sized and hand-carved. The paint was faded, but you could still make out the pale blue saddle and the black glass eyes. I don't know why, but those eyes chilled me. They were too lifelike, as though they were studying me in return. I backed away and let the sheet fall back. As I turned to leave, I heard a creak. The rocking horse was swaying gently, as if a child had just climbed off. That night, Marissa insisted we sleep upstairs, in what had once been the master bedroom. She said the roof was more solid, so there was no chance of rain getting in. I wanted to argue, but something in her expression, perhaps a tightness around her mouth, told me she wasn't going to spend another night in the living room. We set up our sleeping bags by the cold fireplace. I lay there, listening to the wind batter the leaves. At some point, I must have drifted off. I woke up to a sound like a voice, whispering in the darkness. My heart froze. I thought at first it was Marissa talking in her sleep, but then I realised she was sitting up, her face turned toward the open doorway. The whispering continued, but it was too low for me to make out the words. I reached for my flashlight and flicked it on. The beam lit up the hallway beyond our room, and there was something there. A shape, darker than the darkness itself, crouched low to the floor. When the light hit it, the shape retreated, melting into the shadows. Marissa screamed, and the whispering cut off. After that night, everything got worse. During the day we kept working, hauling out trash and prying up rotten floorboards. But at night, the voices came back. Sometimes we'd hear the footsteps again. Once I woke up to find the door to our room standing open, though I was certain I'd locked it. Another time, I saw a figure at the foot of my sleeping bag, short like a child, but when I sat upright, it vanished. I tried to convince Marissa we should leave. Just for a few days, I pleaded. We can come back with more people. But Marissa refused. She'd sunk nearly all her savings into this place, and she wouldn't be driven out by some creaks and bad dreams. On the fourth day, she went into town to pick up supplies, more cleaning fluid and some new locks. I stayed behind to work on the upstairs bathroom, which had been gutted decades earlier. There was a hole in the wall where old pipes jutted like ribs. As I scraped away flaking plaster, my chisel struck something hollow. Curiosity struck, so I widened the hole. Behind the wall was a cavity, a space between the studs, and in that space was a small wooden box, stained dark with age. I pulled it free and set it on the floor. The lid was nailed shut. Part of me didn't want to know what was inside, but I couldn't help myself. I pried the nails loose and opened it. Inside were three objects: a child's porcelain doll with one cracked cheek, a bundle of yellowed papers tied with twine, and a lock of fine pale hair. I picked up the papers first. They were brittle, some kind of diary or confession. The handwriting was sloppy and hard to read. I sat back and squinted at the words. Eventually, I could understand them, but regretted it immediately. The papers read, "I wish to be done with this guilt." The child would not stop crying, no matter what I did. Even after she was put in the ground, the crying would not stop. My throat went dry and I skimmed ahead. It continued. I have tried to lock her away. I have sealed the door, but she finds her way back, night after night. She will not forgive me. She will not leave. The last page was splattered with some dark stain, as if it were a dried up liquid. I put the papers back in the box, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do. Should I show them to Marissa? Call the police? But what would I say that I'd found a century-old confession to murder, and now the place was haunted? That night, I made her read the papers. She looked up at me, her face pale and drawn. "It's just an old story," she whispered. "People write things to scare themselves." "But what if it's not?" I asked. "What if she really—" I didn't get to finish my sentence. From downstairs came a sound like a door slamming, and then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming up the stairs. We both froze. The footsteps reached the landing. For one long moment the house fell silent. Then the child's voice spoke. Clear, close, just outside the bedroom door. "I'm cold," it said meekly. I don't remember racing. I don't remember grabbing Marissa's hand. I only remember the two of us running down the stairs, out the front door, into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. My hands were trembling so badly that I dropped the keys twice before I got the engine started. We drove all the way back to the city without speaking. In the weeks after, Marissa tried to pretend it hadn't happened. She said maybe we'd hallucinated, poisoned by mold or fumes. She started sleeping with the lights on. She never went back to the farmhouse, but I couldn't let it go. I started reading everything I could find about the property, whether it was old newspaper archives or town records. I learned that in 1897, the family who'd lived there, the Malcolms, had lost their only daughter to diphtheria, or so the official story went. But there were rumours about neighbours who'd heard screaming for nights after the child's supposed death. A constable, who'd been called to investigate the matter, had found the grave disturbed. The coffin lid cracked open. His inquest had quietly concluded that the child had been buried alive. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape at the foot of my sleeping bag. Sometimes I heard the voice in my dreams, enunciating the same haunting words. "I'm cold." 3 months later, Marissa called me. Her voice was flat, exhausted, and terrified. "I think she's here," she said. I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She followed me," Marissa's voice cracked. "At night, I hear her. The crying, the footsteps. I saw her, standing at the end of my bed." I tried to reassure her, though my own heart was hammering at my very soul. "You need help. Maybe we both do. We should talk to someone," I said to calm her down. But she hung up. 2 days later, Marissa was dead. They said it was an accident. Apparently, she'd fallen down the stairs in her apartment. But I saw the look on the medical examiner's face when he spoke to me. He knew something was wrong. They all did. I've been staying in hotels ever since. I don't sleep more than an hour or two any given day. No matter where I go, I hear her, and it just won't stop. Last night, I woke up to find the porcelain doll from that box sitting on my pillow, though I swear I left it locked in my storage unit. I'm writing this now in a rented room in Kingston. It's nearly dawn. The shadows in the corners of this room are thickening, coiling together. Sometimes, I think I see her face in them, small, pale, with eyes like dark wells. I don't know how much longer I can keep moving. Wherever I go, she finds me. Maybe she wants me to finish what her father started. Maybe she wants me to pay, or maybe she just wants me to remember her. If you ever find yourself on Fox Hollow Road and you see that house, I beg you, please don't go inside. No matter how curious you are, no matter how empty it looks, because once you open the door, she will follow you, just like she followed Marissa and me, and she will never let you go. My name is David Coppola. If I've learned anything in the last year, it's that some places never really die. They just wait. Wait for someone to walk in and stir the embers that would change your whole perception of the world. When I was growing up in upstate New York, there was an old amusement park called Lakeshore Park, about 20 miles outside Syracuse. My parents had taken me there once when I was a little boy. Even then, it had the faded feel of a place well past its prime peeling paint, tired rides, and more pigeons than people. The park shut down for good in 1999, after a child had disappeared. Nobody could prove exactly what had happened. Some said he'd wandered off into the woods behind the Ferris wheel and drowned in the lake. Others said something else took him, something that had always lived there, something that could not be explained with human logic. After that, the gates were locked and the place was left to rot. It became local legend, like a rite of passage for teenagers to sneak in at night and prove their courage to themselves. I never had the nerve to do such things. Not until last October, which changed my life forever. My older brother Wes called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken much since our mother passed away. He'd moved to the city and mostly disappeared from my life. It was probably to escape dealing with such a traumatic loss. But here, he sounded different on the phone. Tense, hollow, almost as though he was being manipulated. "You remember Lakeshore?" he asked me. "Sure," I said cautiously. "Why?" That's when Wes revealed to me. "I've been going back out there." He took a shaky breath. "I keep seeing things." At first I thought he was drunk. "Wes, what are you talking about?" I asked. He said, "I think there's something in that place. I don't know how to explain it. I need you to come with me, okay? One more time." I was taken aback by this request. "Wes, what's really going on?" I asked. "David, please, just listen to me this one time," he pleaded. I knew I should have said no, but it was the first real conversation we'd had in years. With no real connection to my father, I figured Wes was the only family I could count on. So that Friday night, I drove up to meet him. He was waiting in the cracked parking lot, sitting on the hood of his rusted Jeep. The air smelled like rain and cold leaves. When he slid down to hug me, I could feel how thin he'd gotten since we last met. He didn't look like the brother I remembered at all. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was raw, almost like a completely different person. He handed me a flashlight and started walking toward the rusted gate. Someone had already cut the chain link wide enough to slip through. Anyway, we stepped inside. The path was choked with weeds. Overhead, the remains of the sign still hung. Lakeshore Park, where memories are made. Words that once meant to incite excitement and joy were now nothing more than an indication of the same faded memories. The letters were flaking, dangling from their bolts, giving me the sense that we should not be here. We passed an old ticket booth with shattered windows. Beyond it stretched the Midway. It was a section in the park which was filled with food stands, game stalls, and rides silhouetted against the dark sky. Wes led the way, his flashlight beam jittering over the wreckage. "You hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" I responded. "Listen," he said. I struggled to catch any sound over the wind at first, but then I heard it. Faint music. It was like a steam organ playing somewhere far off, but it was warped, dragging in places, with the notes bending out of tune. I tried to laugh it off by saying it was probably just an old speaker that was stuck on a loop. "It doesn't stop," Wes whispered. "I've been coming here for weeks, David, but it never stops." A general sense of unease started to fill up the air. Wes turned toward the Ferris wheel, looming above us. The cars hung at odd angles, one of them swaying gently in the breeze. For a second, I thought I saw someone sitting in it. A pale shape hunched over. But when I lifted my flashlight, the car was empty. I didn't think much of it. Perhaps it was just the vibe of the place that was making me imagine things. Regardless of the eeriness, we pressed on. Past the funhouse entrance, we saw a wooden clown face with a gaping mouth, and around the tilt-a-whirl, everything was rust and rot. But that music kept playing, and always seemed to be just out of reach. At the far end of the Midway stood the House of Mirrors. Even when I was a child, I'd hated it. There was just something off about all those reflections, all those chances to glimpse something that wasn't you. Tonight, it looked even worse. The entrance was all but collapsed, and the sign had fallen to the ground. But Wes kept walking toward it, almost as if he was being drawn to this strange venue. "Wes, come on," I said, with my voice shaking. "Let's go. You've seen it. It's just an old park." "No," he said as he turned to face me. "I have to go inside." Before I could stop him, he ducked under the sagging doorway. I swore under my breath and followed him, because at that point, there wasn't much else I could do. Inside, the air was cold and wet. My flashlight flickered over broken mirrors, shattered glass crunching underfoot. Each time the beam passed over a fragment, it caught our reflections, stretched and twisted. Sometimes, I felt the reflections lingered a second too long after we moved. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The air smelled like mildew and something sweeter, almost coppery. My skin prickled as every moment passed, but Wes just wouldn't give up. He eventually stopped in front of a tall, cracked mirror. "This is where I saw her," he said. I shone my light over the glass. It was warped in the centre, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. "Saw who?" I asked with a sense of impatience, but Wes didn't answer. He reached out and touched the mirror. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and I was just beginning to think that it was all just a misdirected obsession. But then, the glass rippled under his palm. Wes jerked back immediately. I grabbed his arm, but the mirror rippled again, the distortion spreading outward like a drop in a pond. The music grew louder, shrill and triumphant. I felt a pressure building in my skull, and it was to the point where I thought my head would explode. And then we saw her. In the reflection, a figure stepped into view behind us, impossibly tall, dressed in the shredded remains of a performer's costume. Her face was painted white, with a red grin smeared across her mouth. But the eyes, God, the eyes were just holes, black pits that seemed to swallow the flashlight beam. Wes made a strangled noise. The figure lifted one gloved hand and beckoned. I turned, but there was nothing behind us in the real room, only in the mirror. When I looked back at the glass, she was closer, her head cocked to one side. I dragged Wes away, stumbling over broken glass. We tore back down the hall and out the entrance, into the night, not looking back for even a second. The music died the instant we left. We stood there, gasping. I wanted to run, to get back to the car and escape as soon as possible, but Wes just stared back at the doorway, seemingly enchanted by what he had experienced. "She's still in there," he whispered to me. I was shaking with fear and uncertainty. "Who in God's name is she?" I demanded to know. "When I was a kid," Wes said, voice flat, "I got lost in there once. Mum was with you on the Ferris wheel, but I was by myself. I thought it would be funny to hide inside, but I couldn't find the way out." His eyes were glassy and unfocused as he continued. "She found me. She told me she'd help me leave if I stayed with her for a while. But then Mum found me and I ran. I thought I imagined it, but she remembered me." I didn't know what to say, but I could feel something watching us from the shadows of the midway, waiting for the right moment. "We need to go," I said, realising we were in danger. But Wes shook his head and said, "I think she's been in my head ever since, calling me back to her. I broke her trust, didn't I?" He took a step toward the House of Mirrors. I couldn't believe what was happening, so I grabbed his arm and begged him, "No, Wes, please don't." He looked at me, and for a moment I thought he'd listen, but then his expression went slack, and he tore free. Before I could stop him, he ducked back inside. I ran after him, but as soon as I crossed the threshold, the air changed to something thick and cloying, smelling of rot and sugar. My flashlight kept flickering, and soon enough, it died. I screamed out Wes's name, but there was no answer. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone and turned on the screen's light. It barely lit more than a foot in front of me, but what I saw only crushed my hopes further. The hall was empty. I crept forward, calling for Wes. The music started up again, closer now, echoing all around me. My breath came in ragged gasps. I reached the cracked mirror where we'd first seen the mysterious figure, and oddly enough, Wes was there. In the reflection, he stood beside her, his face slack and vacant. Her gloved hand rested on his shoulder, but in the real room, there was no one. I backed away, my heart slamming against my chest. The reflection didn't move with me. It stayed frozen, with Wes staring through me, and the figure's empty eyes locked on mine. I turned around and ran. Somehow, I found the exit. I burst onto the midway, gulping the cold air. The music stopped. I didn't have it in me to go back inside, so I waited for hours, but Wes never came out. When dawn broke, I staggered back to the Jeep and drove straight to the police. I tried to explain, but they looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. When they searched the park, there was no sign of him. No footprints, no fresh disturbances in the House of Mirrors. They told me maybe he'd fallen into the lake. That was all they could do, but I knew better. That was 6 months ago. I haven't been back. But sometimes when I'm alone, I hear it. The music. Faint under the hum of the refrigerator or the rattling of pipes. And when I look into a dark window or a mirror, I see them both. Wes staring blankly at me, and her smiling. If you ever find yourself on the old county road past Lake Onondaga, and you see the Ferris wheel rising behind the trees, all I ask is that you keep driving. Because she's still in there, waiting for someone to come and stay, and she never forgets a face.